Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Today we have 3 12-foot recreational kayaks, and we're going to figure out why there's a $1,000 price difference between each one. So the 3 kayaks we chose for today's video is the Feelfree Aventura 12.5, the Eddyline Skylark, and the Stellar S12. All 12-foot long, all around 25 to 26 inches wide, and really similar cockpit dimensions are all about 18 by 35 or so. They all feature perimeter deck bungees, perimeter deck lines, front and rear hatches and bulkheads, so they all have positive flotation both in the front and the back. So if these were to capsize, it'd be easy to upright and get back in the boats. They all have cross pattern deck bungees in the back that you can use for self-rescue, and they're all red. I did not plan them, that's just how it came out. I had 3 boats, they were all new, and they all happen to be red. So now the question is, if they're all so similar, why would one cost $1,000 more than the next? We're gonna start off with the Feelfree Aventura because this boat comes in at $749. It's the highest capacity, the most stable, most forgiving boat of the bunch, but it's also the heaviest. This one's made out of rotomolded polyethylene, and it comes in at about 55 pounds. Compare that to a Skylark coming in at 41 pounds. You're carrying around roughly an extra 15 pounds of plastic when you're loading and unloading that. Part of that reason is because of the material. Rotomolded's a little heavier duty, but it's also other things, like it's got these hatches, which are heavy duty plastic and foam bulkheads. That all adds a little bit of weight. It also has a retractable skag in the back. That adds a little bit of weight as well. None of these other boats have that feature. The blow molded seat adds a lot of comfort, but it also adds weight. So all these little things add up to, like I said, roughly about 15 pounds. The other thing about rotomolded kayaks is you can't get quite the same sharp, clean edges. So they do things like this. These are grooves in the hull that add tracking, but more importantly, they add stiffness. When you have big open areas on a polyethylene kayak, it can be prone to warping and denting over time. So they add these tracks there for a little bit of stiffness and rigidity to the hull. The seat is kind of a mid-back. It's not super high and it's not super low. It's there to support your lower back and engage good posture, but it's not there to be a lounge chair. These boats are all meant for active paddling, so you're gonna wanna sit upright, but you do have some good adjustment. You've got a little adjustment here that allows that seat to go forward and backwards so you can dial it into your posture. Other things that this boat has is a really large rear hatch. If you compare this to the size of the Skylark, you'll notice it's got quite a bit more room. The whole boat carries its volume further into the bow, further into the stern, so you have a bigger area. That offers more stability, and it's also why it has about a 50-pound higher capacity. The downside of that is it means it's gonna be a little slower on the water than the Skylark or the S12. This, however, does have a lot of the same DNA as these other boats. So if you're looking to get into the sport and you want something stable, forgiving, but that's gonna have good glide and good efficiency on the water, the Feelfree Aventura is a great place to start. Next up, we have the Eddyline Skylark. This one comes in at 41 pounds and is $1,000 more than the Feelfree Aventura. The benefits to the Skylark is its thermoformed ABS plastic, making it quite a bit lighter weight. It also means you can get these really sharp, crisp edges. Look at the entry on that boat. That thing's gonna slice and pierce the water. And 15 pounds might not seem like a lot, but I tell you what, even just me carrying these boats over here, the Skylark felt significantly lighter. And if you're putting this on top of an SUV, this is a boat you're gonna wanna put on your car a lot more than the Aventura. So Eddyline uses Select Designs hatches, which seal really well. They're also easy to get on and off. They're just like a Tupperware lid, retractable handles. But you see the overall shape of the boat is a lot more pinched. This is more of an arrowhead shape, whereas the Feelfree bulbouses out a little bit quicker. This is gonna be more efficient on the water, not just because of the design, but also because of the material. Thermoform and fiberglass glide a lot nicer on the water than polyethylene. As we work our way back to the cockpit here, you see the same kind of seat as the Aventura. The difference here is this one is adjustable. So if you're a smaller person, you might want that seat back a little lower so it's hitting you in the small of your back. If you're a taller person like me, I have this 3 notches up, but it actually has 5 different points of adjustment. So it could even go 2 notches higher than this if we wanted to. The pan in the Eddyline is also made of thermoform plastic, so it's contoured. It has hip pads on either side, a pad under your butt, and then also thigh pads underneath your knees. So you have 5 points of contact. So you're really connected in with this boat. You're starting to get to boats where you're gonna wear them more than just sit inside them. So the Skylark is sort of the middle ground. This one comes in at $1749. And if you're ready to spend another $1,000, that's where the Stellar comes in. This one's $28.95. So it's actually $1,000 and some change. But what you're getting is a super high performance, hand-laid, hand-built, one-at-a-time boat. So when we're talking about Stellar, we have to talk about the heritage and the DNA where this boat comes from. Stellar is a company that's based around performance paddling. Most of their boats are 17, 18-foot long touring kayaks, 20-foot long surf skis. They're all about efficiency, about racing, performance. This is actually one of the most recreational kayaks they sell, whereas over on the Feelfree side of things, that's actually the highest performing kayak that they sell. So we're just coming at it from different ends of the spectrum here. But what you get with the Stellar is you get an ultra light boat. So if you're wanting a boat that you can pick up with one hand, that you can get to the water, you can slide it on top of your SUV, quick and easy, this is the boat for you. The downside to an ultralight composite like this is you have to baby it a little bit more. You have to be aware of where you're launching, where you're landing. You don't want to run this one up on the rocks. Versus a thermoform boat or the rotomolded boat, you can be a lot more rough and tumble with and not have to worry about it as much. I always say with composite kayaks, you need to be willing to get your feet wet. So when you're getting in and out of this thing, you need to get out on the water. You don't want to ram it on shore. But the benefits, the performance of this boat as opposed to the Aventura is going to be substantial. You're really going to feel a difference on the water, and we'll get to that on the on-water portion of this review. So let's get down to the nuts and bolts of this boat. So on the front, as opposed to having a retractable deck handle, you have a nice solid carry handle. You've got bungee up here in the front, so if you wanted to bring a spare paddle, you could. They put a large oval front hatch on this boat. It's actually bigger than I would have expected. You could put a substantial amount of gear in there if you wanted to. Most of the time the front hatches are there just sort of like, man, maybe you put a dry bag, but this you could actually camp out of if you wanted to. Moving our way back into the paddler station, you'll notice that the deck lines are brought in and they have these little cutouts on either side. That's kind of a tip to the hat of their performance side of things. All their kayaks will have this. And what it means is you can have a nice tight paddle stroke without clipping your knuckles, without hitting your hands on these deck lines. You can have a nice efficient forward stroke, and this is just out of your way. It feels like a much smaller kayak than it is when you're in it. As we make our way back to the cockpit, this is where your comfort comes in. You'll notice it's a little bit more sparse than the Eddyline or the Feelfree. They just use a neoprene back band. They do have a higher back option if you want, which would get you closer to the Eddyline here. But stock, it comes with a simple neoprene backband that you can adjust forward or backwards to hit you in the small of the back. Comfortable padded seat with a fiberglass seat pan. The nice thing about a molded seat pan is they can really get the contours right. So the boat doesn't rely so much on padding as it relies on support. So in the cockpit section here, you notice this nice neoprene pad. That's if you're going barefoot. You can rest your heels on there and you don't grind up against the bottom of the boat. And then really nice adjustable foot pedals. These things are solid. This is the same thing I have on my S16. They feel solid. You can push against them. They feel really connected to the boat. Behind the seat, you have a little locking point, so you can lock this boat up. Perimeter deck lines, and then rescue bungees if you needed to do a paddle float rescue. In the back, you have a large hatch. Again, plenty of room. I could fit lots of stuff down inside this boat. I could bring a sleeping bag, a tent if I wanted to. I even saw a guy the other day with a small dog hanging on the back of his. But I think the biggest difference between these three boats is when we flip them over. So let's go ahead and have a look at the hulls and talk a little bit about the designs. So I've actually never done this. It's really interesting to flip these boats over side by side because they're so different. These two boats have a real similar hull design where they have a hard chine along the edge here. That's going to give good stability. That's going to give you a little bit more air buoyancy on the side to kind of fight back when you're on the water. You'll notice these have the tracking grooves that we mentioned earlier, but you notice how sharp that entry is on the Eddyline compared to the Feelfree. That's just something you can do with thermoform or composite that you can't do with rotomolding. Next, we're going to look at the keels of these boats. Look at how sharp that keel is on the Eddyline. That's going to give you a clean exit, allowing that water to come back together as it exits the boat. The Feelfree, on the other hand, it's a little flatter, a little more bulbous. It's got the replaceable keel on it. Again, a little more utilitarian as opposed to performance over here. So these two boats, even though they have similar stats, are very different design philosophies. The Eddyline, you see all these hard lines, hard edges, hard keel that runs the entire length of the boat, making a nice V bottom. Over here on the Stellar, you see very round edges. Even though it's the same width, rounded edges. So this boat's going to want to roll to its secondary a little smoother. It's got a very smooth bottom section, so no keel that runs the entire length of the boat. That, in theory, should allow that boat to kind of slide a little bit more side to side as opposed to the Eddyline. You'll notice in the stern, the keels start close to the same spot, but the Stellar has a really, really deep defined keel. This is something you can do with composites that you can't necessarily do with thermoformed or rotomolded. You could get close on thermoform, but this is a pretty deep pocket right here. Also, the Stellar has a little bit more rocker in the bow, a little bit more rounded keel up in the front. But I'm expecting these two boats to have, even though they'll paddle slightly different, I expect them to have a similar feel on the water. But why are we guessing about it? We're here at the lake. Let's go hit the water, jump in these boats, and see if it's really worth $1,000 more for the Eddyline or another $1,000 for the Stellar. First things first, we're gonna get this Aventura down. Oh, now that's a lot easier. Skylark, 41 pounds. Can handle that. And then the Stellar at 33. That's ridiculous. But I want to be a little more careful on these rocks, that's for sure. We'll be a lot more gentle setting this guy down. These kind of sharp rocks sticking up, if you were to jump in this kayak, you would definitely have dents and dings out of your gel coat. Whereas both the Eddyline and the Feelfree, it's not going to matter. You might get a little dents in the Feelfree, but that's just the nature of polyethylene. It's going to scratch, it's going to peel, it's going to be fine. Make a couple of adjustments here. Feelfree has these little twist and lock foot pedals. Fairly easy to use, but they definitely feel like they have a lot more flex and flimsiness, I'd say, than some of the others. Backrest feels good. Again, when I'm sitting in my kayak, I'm not lounging back here. I'm thinking about rotating my pelvis forward, kind of scooting my butt back in the seat so I can engage good posture. I'm 6'2", so I have plenty of leg room, 220 pounds, so plenty of capacity on all three of these kayaks. This is, should be perfect for me. Let's give it a shot. Yeah, the stability on this Aventura is really awesome. You know, it's not a very wide boat. It's only, I think it's 26 inches wide, but it feels really, really stable. Like I can lean it way over on that secondary. The same thing I was saying that makes it bulbous with the buoyancy going way up into the nose, way into the stern. That also makes it feel rock solid on a secondary edge. There's a difference between edging and leaning a boat too. Something that you all should know is that when you're edging a boat, your nose is staying over your belly button. So you can put the boat on edge and use that edge to help steer and to drive the boat. The difference with that and leaning is my whole body's going over. And if my whole body at some point, I need to do a brace or I'm gonna go in the water. And what we're testing with secondary stability is how far does that boat wanna lean before it starts wanting to go over. And this boat will go pretty far onto its secondary edge, yeah. I've reviewed this boat a few times in a few different videos, and it's one of my favorites because I think for 750 bucks, it is just such a great value for somebody getting into the sport. Has a retractable skag over here. So if it was a windy day out here, we could just put that skag down and this boat's gonna track perfectly straight. I personally like to have it up because it tracks pretty well on its own. And now I've got a maneuverable lively boat if I wanna put it on edge and make some turns. So speaking of turns, let's see how it maneuvers. It's a 12-foot boat. Fair amount of keel on it. Test this by alternating reverse strokes, forward sweep, yeah, it turns really well. It initiates well with a sweep stroke. What I like about it is you saw how my boat was edging there. If you're sweeping properly and you're rotating, putting the paddle behind you, the boat's naturally going to want to edge towards your paddle. Same is true if I'm doing a sweep away. As I sweep away and straighten my leg out, the boat's naturally going to want to edge towards the side you're paddling on. And this boat responds well to that. Super maneuverable. It does feel kind of just heavy on the water. You know, it's the nature of this style of boat, is it's not meant to be ultra light and fast and zippy, but it feels utilitarian. It feels like a, you know, like an F-250, just built to last, built to be strong and durable. I'm just going to let the wind blow me. Ideally with the skag up, the boat should slowly want to turn into the wind. The nice thing is if I put my skag down, the boat locks on track and then it keeps running straight. Both the other boats we're going to look at do not have retractable skags, but you'll notice they have a more defined keel. So it's kind of like having a skag built in, but it's nice to have that adjustment so you can have the best of maneuverability and tracking. And one thing you'll notice on both Eddyline and Stellar's higher end boats like the S14 or the Sitka range is they'll actually come with skags on them as well, but they're a little bit more performance oriented. Let's pop back in and jump in the Eddyline and see how it compares to this one. Polyethylene kayaks, I could just ram it on the beach. I don't have to worry about it. Next, we're gonna check out the Skylark here. I've probably spent more time in this boat than any of these boats. We have a few of these down at our boathouse, and it's our go-to premium rental. And it's also the boat I use if I'm just running down there to lead a tour or something, I'll jump in a Skylark. For foot pedal adjustment on the Eddyline, I have this little red flap, and then I can adjust the foot pedal forward and backwards to where I want it. Flip that down, and that's a nice secure fit. So first thing I noticed, the big difference is the fit of this boat. It definitely feels lower on my thighs, a little bit more peaked in the deck. You know, at 6'2", even though I have a few more notches on my foot pedals, it feels snug on my legs. I think if you were over 220 pounds, or maybe you had thicker legs, maybe you should be looking at something like a Sandpiper or something a little bit bigger. You know, 220 pounds under, this thing's gonna suit you just fine. And you can kind of see along the side here, I'm probably right up to the Eddyline logo. Again, this is a 50-pound less capacity than the Aventura I was in, and it feels a little snugger, a little tighter. But let's see how it paddles. First thing I noticed with just a few strokes is how much quicker this boat wants to get up to speed. It doesn't feel like you're moving as much boat through the water. Whew, zippy. Yeah, it just feels like effortless paddling in this boat. Tracking is really good, a little side wind on us. The boat tends to want to go where you tell it to go. When I'm thinking about secondary edge compared to the Aventura, this one definitely has a little less. It almost feels like I'm sitting slightly up compared to that Aventura. And then the secondary edge, it wants to tilt, and with that V bottom, it feels a little bit more tender up top, but then locks into a nice firm secondary edge. As we move up through these boats, performance is something that we're gonna talk about. As you get higher performing boats, as you get faster, more agile boats, well, you're also gonna get a little bit less stability. As far as edging the boat and steering with the boat, feels like it's quick to want to get on that edge. Very, very little body motion I have to do. I mentioned the Skylark having more keel built in, and it definitely feels like that. It feels like it takes a little bit more effort to get the boat to spin a circle, but I also noticed it to track better than the Aventura with the skeg up. Obviously with the skeg down, the Aventura tracked great. Sweet. I'm gonna go ahead and spin her around here. Nice. I'm gonna paddle back towards you. So fun to be in. It just feels light and like flicky. Like I can just maneuver it around with such little lower body input. You know, I mentioned it before about the Skylark and the S12 being sort of the more recreational end of what these companies do, but you can definitely feel the DNA of those longer touring sea kayaks built into this littler boat. All right, let's head back and grab that Stellar. Again, you're gonna see me get my feet wet on this one. I'm gonna float the boat before I get in, which people are often concerned about that. They're like, well, I wouldn't want a boat that I'd have to baby so much. It's not even that big of a deal to baby it. You just have to be aware, you know? If it hits the rocks, you know, it's not the end of the world, but you do just wanna be aware. Again, with the adjustment on these foot pedals, it's back here, you just pick it up, and this one just slides back and forth to where you want it to be. Feels very secure. So the fit of this boat is more like the Aventura, actually. It feels, I don't know, it feels deeper. It feels like my knees have more room in this boat than I did on the Skylark. It feels more bulbous around my body. Part of that is because the seat pan feels like it's dropped down lower, like I'm sitting on the bottom of the boat a little bit more than I was in the Skylark. But along that same line, I don't feel like I have as much support underneath my thighs as I did in the Skylark. So a lot of this comes down to sitting in boats, feeling them out. It's not very dissimilar, but it is noticeable. I feel more comfortable in this one than I did the Skylark. The backrest is low in this boat. It definitely feels lower than on the Skylark. I would probably adjust it a notch forward compared to where I have it, but it isn't as supportive right off the bat. If you're more concerned about support, I would go with the higher back option that they offer from Stellar. As far as efficiency, I feel like my paddle's barely in the water and it's just cruising. I can't wait to get this thing up to speed and see how it does. Woo-hoo-hoo. Yeah, I think it's zippy. Wow. Feels really stable. It honestly feels more like the Aventura. It feels more stable than the Eddyline. Like I can lean it, maybe not quite as far as the Aventura, but more so than the Eddyline. It just feels like it has a lower center of gravity overall. Feels real maneuverable. That rounded bottom, as I expected, slices and moves across the water a little easier. More expensive, higher performance. It's kind of what you would expect. You'd expect a boat to be a little bit more playful. Yeah, it's cool. Not that I expect to see you guys doing that at home, but it's nice to know you could. Let's spin this one around and see how it compares to the others. Again, I'm going to use those reverse sweep strokes, alternate that with a forward sweep. You can definitely feel the keel in the water. It's got a lot of keel back there. It's interesting, I expected it to spin faster. I think the Aventura wins that contest. This boat and the Skylark feel real similar because of the amount of keel. But for some reason it feels more maneuverable when I'm at speed, like when I'm cruising through the water. I don't know if it's the rounded hull or what, but it feels a little bit more lively. A beginner might not like that. A beginner might like that Skylark better because it's so well behaved and just tracks and kind of does what you'd expect it to do. But as a more advanced paddle, I like the playfulness nature of this boat. I like that I can put it on edge and zip some turns and kind of do some draw strokes, and the boat feels a little bit more lively. So I wouldn't call them beginner boats, but they're all recreational kayaks that I could put a beginner in and they would go out and they'd be successful. But you could also grow in the sport and do a lot of things with these boats. You know, if you wanted to get involved in your local kayak club and you wanted to learn rescues and you wanted to go on tours, you could do that in all three of these 12-foot kayaks. Let's head back to shore. We'll talk about who each one of these boats is right for. All right, again, getting out. Get my feet wet. All right, let's hop out and we'll line them up and compare these three. Well, this was a review I've been wanting to do for a long time. All three of these boats are boats that I have in my demo fleet and that I've had in the warehouse, and I've been wanting to get out and compare. Because on paper, they're all so similar, but $1,000 price gap between the three. So who would each boat be right for? Who would be buying a $750 boat versus a $1,750 boat versus a nearly $3,000 boat? Well, it really comes down to a person's budget and their physical abilities. Because if somebody's in their 60s and they drive an SUV, they're not going to be able to put that Aventura on their car. They're just not going to be able to do it. Whereas a Skylark at 41 pounds, yeah, maybe they could do that. And a Stellar at 33 pounds, definitely. And the Stellar, this is actually the heaviest layup they offer. They offer two additional layups. The XL layup, which drops the weight down to 30 pounds, and then the Alpha layup, which is a full carbon boat, drops it down to 29 pounds. Obviously, with those weight drops and those fancier layups, your price jumps up accordingly as well. But really, that's the deal. It's somebody that's maybe had a kayak, they know they love the sport, they want to get something lightweight that's going to age well with them, is going to jump into something like a Stellar. And they're going to baby it. They're going to take care of it. It's going to be stored inside in their garage or outside under a cover. It's going to be launched from the water. It's going to be something that you have to baby, but you're going to love it. You're going to take good care of it because it's going to be your baby. The Skylark is kind of in between. I think if somebody was looking at a polyethylene kayak but they were struggling with the weight, they can jump in a Skylark and have a great time. They're not going to have any regrets on buying an Eddyline. They do what you think it should. It's stable, it's forgiving. It's just sort of a good do-it-all boat that's still rugged enough to handle the abuse that most people would put through it. So if you're looking for your first boat, or a boat that maybe you can grow with and then pass on to a family member or let friends and family loan out, the Aventura is a great way to go. That thing's got a ton of value, a ton of comfort, and a ton of stability for somebody getting into the sport, and you're going to be able to grow with that boat kind of to wherever you want to be. I stand behind my original assessment of that boat, saying it's the best value under $1,000 if you're looking for a light touring boat. I challenge you, look around the industry and find something better. I've looked and I haven't found anything that compares with what that boat has to offer at that price point. So thanks so much for watching. If you're not already, subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, hit the notification bell, do all the things. We love having you as part of our community. Until next time, this is Dan wishing you happy paddling. We'll see you on the next one.